Princess Valara stood at the window of her palace and watched the human transport ship land in the courtyard. Below, her heart felt heavy like a stone in her chest. Today was her wedding day, but there would be no celebration. No music, no dancing, only shame. The Celestine Empire stretched across 1,000 star systems. Her people had silver skin that glowed softly in the dark. They could move objects with their minds and live for nearly 500 years. They were proud, they were powerful, and they believed humans were nothing more than clever animals. R had made the mistake of speaking against the High Council. She had stood before them and called their wars unjust. She had demanded peace. For this crime they had chosen the cruelest punishment they could imagine. They would marry her to a human. The man who walked off the ship was not what she expected. He was average height with brown hair and brown eyes. He wore simple clothes that looked old and worn. He carried only one small bag and a wooden chest. His name, she had been told, was Daniel Cole. He worked as a cargo loader on a freighter ship. He had been chosen through a random lottery picked from millions of humans scattered across the galaxy. He was nobody, he was nothing. And now he was her husband. The wedding ceremony lasted only 10 minutes. The High Council members watched with cruel smiles on their faces. Ara spoke her vows in a voice that did not shake, because she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Daniel spoke his vows quietly and clearly. He did not seem afraid or nervous. He simply seemed calm. When it was over, they were taken to her private chambers in the east tower of the palace. The door closed behind them, and Valara finally allowed herself to look at him properly. You may sleep in the outer room, she said coldly. There is a bed there. You will not enter my chamber without permission. You will not touch me. You will not speak to me unless I speak first. Do you understand? Daniel nodded slowly. I understand, Your Highness. She waited for him to argue, to demand his rights as her husband, to show the barbaric nature that all humans surely possessed. But he simply picked up his bag and his wooden chest and walked to the outer room. He closed the door gently behind him. Ara stood alone in her chamber and felt confused for the first time in many years. The days turned into weeks. Daniel never broke her rules. He stayed in his room during the day, only coming out for meals. He ate whatever the servants gave him. Without complaint, he thanked them politely and learned their names. He smiled at them and asked about their families. The servants began to like him. This annoyed Valara greatly. One morning she found him on her balcony. He had brought soil from somewhere and had planted seeds in small containers. His hands were dirty and he was humming a soft tune. What are you doing? She demanded. Daniel looked up at her. His eyes were warm and gentle. Starting a garden, Your Highness. I hope you don't mind. I find it calms my mind. A garden here. She looked at the small green shoots pushing up through the soil. We have machines that can grow food. We have servants who can bring you flowers. Why would you do this with your own hands? Because there is joy in watching things grow, Daniel said. Simply because putting your hands in the dirt reminds you that you are alive. Because some things are worth doing. Slowly, Valara did not understand him. She walked away without another word. But she came back the next day, and the day after that she would stand at the edge of the balcony and watch him work. She told herself she was simply curious about this strange human behavior. Nothing more. One evening after 3 months of marriage, Valara found herself sitting across from Daniel at dinner. The servants had gone, the palace was quiet. Outside, the twin moons of her world rose slowly into the purple sky. "You are not what I expected," she said. Suddenly, Daniel looked up from his food. "What did you expect, Your Highness?" "Cruelty," she admitted. "Stupidity. Violence. My people believe humans are barely more than animals. I expected you to prove them right." Daniel was quiet for a moment, then he smiled, but it was a sad smile, a smile that held old pain. "Humans are full of surprises," he said softly. "We can be cruel. Yes, we can be stupid and violent. We have done terrible things throughout our history. But we can also be kind. We can create beautiful music and art. We can love with all our hearts. We are not just one thing." Valara studied his face. There was something in his eyes that she had not noticed before. Something deep and hidden, something that whispered of secrets kept locked away. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" she asked. "You could have refused. You could have hidden. Why come here to be treated like nothing?" Daniel set down his cup. He looked out the window at the rising moons. "Because I was tired of hiding," he said. "Because I wanted to start over, somewhere far away from everything I knew. Because when they said they needed a human volunteer, something told me to raise my hand." He looked back at her. "I do not expect you to love me, Your Highness. I do not expect you to even like me, but I promise you this: I will never lie to you. I will never hurt you. And I will never give you reason to regret that I am here." Valara did not know what to say, so she said nothing at all. But that night, for the first time since her wedding, she did not cry herself to sleep. The attack came without warning on a night when the stars burned bright and beautiful above the palace. Valara was in her study, reading reports about trade agreements and border disputes. Daniel was on the balcony watering his garden by moonlight. Everything was peaceful, everything was normal. Then the sky turned red. The first explosion shook the entire palace. Valara was thrown from her chair. Books fell from shelves, glass shattered. Somewhere in the distance, she scrambled to her feet and ran to the window just in time to see a second blast tear through the city's shield dome. "The Drawrath," she whispered, her blood turned cold. The Drawrath Dominion was the most feared military power in the galaxy. Their soldiers were 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that could stop a plasma bolt. They had claws that could tear through metal and teeth that could crush bone. They lived for war. They breathed violence, and for reasons Valara did not understand. They were attacking her world. Daniel appeared at her door. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "We need to move, Your Highness." Now Valara nodded and grabbed her emergency pack. Together they ran through the palace hallways. All around them servants screamed and fled. Palace guards rushed past, their weapons ready. Explosions continued to rock the building. They reached the throne room just as the main doors burst open. Valara froze. Standing in the doorway was a Drawrath commander, his red eyes glowing with hunger. Behind him stood at least 40 soldiers, all armed with plasma rifles and viral blades. Her own guards formed a defensive line, but she knew it was hopeless. There were too many enemies. Princess Valara, the commander, hissed, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. The Dominion thanks you for your hospitality. Your world will make a fine addition to our territory. Your people will make excellent slaves. You will not take this world, Valara said. Her voice was steady even though her heart was racing. The Celestine Empire will respond. You will face justice for this attack. The commander laughed. It was an ugly sound. The Empire is weak. Precious Council has already fled. There is no one coming to save you, princess. No one at all. He raised his clawed hand and pointed at her. Kill the guards. Take the princess alive. Kill the human. He is worthless. The Dracorath soldiers advanced. Valara's guards raised their weapons. The first shots were fired. Bodies began to fall. Val grabbed Daniel and LT Unk and GT's arm. There is a ship in the lower hangar, a small transport if we can reach it. No, she stared at him. What? Daniel's face had changed. The warmth was gone from his eyes. In its place was something cold, something ancient, something terrifying. Stay behind me, Valara. He walked toward the wooden chest he always kept near him, the chest he had brought from Earth, the chest he had never opened in front of anyone. Daniel, what are you doing? We need to run. He did not answer. He knelt beside the chest and placed his hand on its surface. There was a soft click and the lid swung open. Inside was a sword. Ara had never seen anything like it. It was not a plasma blade or a photon cutter or any of the advanced weapons her people used. It was made of simple metal, folded and hammered and sharpened by hand. Strange symbols ran along its length, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to come from nowhere. The handle was wrapped in old leather, worn smooth by countless hours of use. Daniel lifted the sword from the chest. He held it in both hands for a moment. His eyes closed, his lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his eyes opened and he rose to his feet. Daniel, Valara whispered, "What is that?" He did not look at her. His gaze was fixed on the Drareth soldiers who were now advancing through the throne room, stepping over the bodies of her fallen guards. "Stay behind me," he said again. "Do not move. Do not run, just stay behind me." He gripped the sword with one hand and pulled it from its sheath. The sound it made was like nothing had ever heard. Whisper, a song, a promise of death. The first Dracorath soldier saw Daniel and laughed. This tiny human with his primitive weapon, this joke, this insect. The soldier raised his plasma rifle. He never fired. Daniel moved. One moment he was standing still. The next moment he was across the room, his blade buried in the soldier's chest. The Drareth looked down at the sword with confusion in his dying eyes. He could not understand what had happened. He could not understand how this was possible. Daniel pulled the blade free and turned to face the others. "Who's next?" he asked quietly. "The Drarth commander roared with fury. "Kill him. Kill him now." 40 soldiers charged at once. Daniel smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not the smile of the gentle gardener who talked to servants and planted flowers on the balcony. It was the smile of a predator who had finally been given permission to hunt. He moved through them like a shadow, like a ghost, like death itself given human form. His blade sang as it cut through the air. Dracorath soldiers fell one after another. They fired their weapons, but Daniel was never where they aimed. They swung their claws, but Daniel was always faster. They screamed. and roared and tried to run, but there was no escape. In 7 minutes it was over. 43 Jareth elite soldiers laid dead on the throne room floor. Their violet blood painted the walls and pulled on the marble tiles. Daniel stood in the center of the carnage. His breathing was slow and even. His clothes were splattered with alien blood, but he himself was completely unharmed. Not a single scratch, not a single wound. He turned to face Ara. She could not speak, she could not move, she could only stare at this man she thought she knew, this quiet, gentle man who tended gardens and read books and smiled at servants. Who are you? She finally managed to whisper. Daniel looked at the sword in his hand. The blade was still dripping with violet blood. I am sorry, Valera, he said softly. I should have told you sooner. He lifted his eyes to meet hers. My name is Daniel Cole, but that is not the name I was born with, and a cargo loader is not what I truly am. Valera stood in the throne room surrounded by death. The bodies of Jareth soldiers lay everywhere, their violet blood still warm on the marble floor. The air smelled of copper and smoke, and in the center of it all stood her husband, holding a sword that dripped with the blood of her enemies. She had watched warriors fight her entire life. The Celestine Empire held great tournaments where the champions of a dozen species competed for glory. She had seen fighters with forearms, with claws of diamond, with bodies that could bend light itself. None of them moved like Daniel had moved. He had been like water flowing through rocks, like wind passing through leaves. Each strike was perfect. Each step was exactly where it needed to be. There was no wasted movement, no moment of hesitation, just death delivered with the precision of a master artist painting his final work. Explain, Ara said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Explain to me what I just witnessed. Daniel stood still for a long moment. He looked at the sword in his hand, then slowly wiped it clean on a fallen soldier's uniform. When he spoke, his voice was soft and heavy with old pain. On earth where I was born, there is a saying, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. It means that those who stand out, those who are different, are often punished for it. He sheathed the sword and turned to face her fully. The cold warrior was gone. In his place was the man she had come to know over the past months, the gardener, the reader, the gentle soul who thanked servants for their kindness. When humanity spread across the stars, we were weak. We had no psychic powers like your people, no natural weapons like the Jareth. We were soft and small and short-lived. The other species saw us as nothing, workers to be used, slaves to be traded, animals to be ignored. He walked to a window and looked out at the burning city below. Ships flew overhead, both Celestine and Jareth fighting a desperate battle. The smoke-filled sky, but some humans refused to accept this fate. They created a secret program called the Black Dawn Initiative. They searched the galaxy for human children who showed special potential, children who were faster, stronger, smarter than normal, children who could be trained, children who could be turned into weapons. Valara felt a chill run down her spine. You were one of these children. I was taken when I was 4 years old, Daniel said quietly. I do not remember my parents. I do not remember my home. I only remember the training, the endless brutal training. They taught us to fight with every weapon ever created. They taught us to kill with our bare hands. They taught us to ignore pain, to suppress fear, to become something more than human and less than human at the same time. He touched the sword at his hip. This blade was given to me when I completed my training. It is over 300 years old, forged on earth by a master craftsman. The symbols on the blade are from an ancient human warrior tradition. They are meant to remind the wielder that the sword is not just a weapon, it is a responsibility. How many of you were there? Valara asked. 50 children entered the program. 12 survived the training. We were given code names. Instead of real names, I was called Reaper 7. The name hung in the air like a ghost reaper, a creature from human mythology, a being that collected souls of the dead. We were sent on missions that no one else could complete. Daniel continued. We killed warlords and pirates and corrupt politicians. We ended wars before they could begin. We did the dark work that kept humanity safe, and no one ever knew we existed. What happened to the program? Daniel's jaw tightened. The Terran Senate discovered it. They were horrified. They called us monsters, abominations. They ordered the program shut down and all evidence destroyed, and the 12 survivors scattered, hidden, erased from every record. He finally turned to look at her. I changed my name. I took a job on a cargo ship. For mine, I lookly say, are ready. Climb. I waited to already climbing. 10 already climbing. 10. I ready. Climbing 10. I waited to Luce. I tried to forget everything I had been trained to do. I tried to be ordinary. I tried to be human. Valara walked toward him. Slowly, the blood on the floor made soft sounds beneath her feet. She stopped an arm's length away and looked into his eyes. Why did you never tell me? Because I was ashamed. His voice cracked slightly. Because I did not want you to look at me and see a monster. Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me as just a man. Simple, ordinary man. And I wanted so badly for that to be true. You killed 43 soldiers in 7 minutes. Daniel, with a piece of metal. I know you moved faster than my eyes could follow. I know you are not ordinary. You are not simple. You are not just a man. Daniel closed his eyes. I know. Valara reached out and touched his face. Her silver fingers were cool against his skin. He opened his eyes and she saw tears threatening to fall. But you are also not just a monster, she said softly. A monster would not grow flowers. A monster would not learn the names of servants. Monster would not cry. I have done terrible things, Valara. And yet you chose to be gentle. You chose to be kind. You had the power to take whatever you wanted, and instead you asked permission to water plants on my balcony. She moved her hand to his chest, where his heart beat beneath her palm. That is not the heart of a monster. That is the heart of a man who is tired of war. Daniel covered her hand with his own. I never wanted you to know. I wanted to protect you from what I am. You just protected me from an army. I think I can handle the truth. A small smile crossed his face. It was sad and grateful, and something else she could not name. The Dracorath will send more soldiers. He said this was only the first wave. When they learn what happened here, they will come back. With greater numbers, they will want revenge. Then we will fight them. Your people hate me. Valara the High Council wants me dead. Valara lifted her chin. The High Council fled like cowards. My people need a leader who will stay and fight, and I need a husband who will stand beside me. She took his hand, the hand that had just killed 43 enemies without mercy. Will you stand beside me, Daniel Cole? Will you fight with me? Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then he squeezed her hand gently. Until my last breath, he said, until the stars go dark, I will stand beside you. Outside, the battle continued to rage, but in the throne room, surrounded by the bodies of their enemies, a princess and a warrior made a promise that would change the fate of the galaxy. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On every station, on every planet, on every ship that sailed between the stars, beings of 100 different species heard the same impossible story. Single human had slaughtered an entire Dracarith strike team, not with plasma cannons or nuclear weapons or advanced technology, with a sword, a simple blade of folded steel. At first no one believed it. Humans were weak, humans were slow, humans were the lowest species in the galactic hierarchy. The idea that one of them could defeat 43 Drarath elite soldiers was laughable. Then the footage appeared. Security recordings from the palace showed everything. They showed Daniel moving through the throne room like a spirit of death. They showed the Drarath falling one after another, unable to even touch him. They showed a single man with a primitive weapon doing the impossible. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. And then the questions began. What else had humanity been hiding? How many more soldiers like this existed? What else could humans do? The Dragarath Dominion was not interested in questions. They wanted blood. The human must be handed over immediately. The Dracarath High Marshal declared in a message broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. He has committed crimes against the Dominion. He has murdered our soldiers in cold blood. If the Celestine Empire does not surrender him within 3 days, we will consider it an act of war. We will burn their worlds to ash. The Celestine High Council had reformed on a distant station far from the battle. They had abandoned their people and their princess, but they still believed they held power. When they received the Dracarath demand, they saw an opportunity. The human is nothing to us, the High Chancellor said to his fellow council members. He is a burden, a embarrassment. If giving him to the Drarath will prevent war, then we should do so gladly. They sent soldiers to the palace, 50 of the best remaining Celestine warriors armed with the finest weapons. Their orders were simple: arrest the human, deliver him to the Drarath, kill him if he resists. None of them returned. The High Chancellor received a single message from the palace. It contained a video. In the video, the 50 soldiers lay unconscious in a pile in the courtyard. Not dead, not even seriously injured, just sleeping, their weapons broken beside them. Daniel stood over them, his sword sheathed at his side. Tell the council they are welcome to try again, he said calmly, but the result will be the same. I am not a gift to be handed over. I am not a prisoner to be traded, and I will not go quietly into the night. The High Chancellor nearly choked on his rage. He immediately contacted the Drarath and confirmed that the Celestine Empire would cooperate fully with their demands. Then he prepared a second force. This time he would send 1,000 soldiers. This time there would be no mercy. But before he could give the order, Princess Valara appeared on every screen in the Empire. She stood in the throne room of the palace, Beside her stood Daniel. Behind them stood the servants, the guards, the common people who had chosen to stay and fight rather than flee. They were battered and tired, but they stood, with their heads held high. People of the Celestine Empire, Valara said, your council has abandoned you. They fled at the first sign of danger and now hide. Like cowards in the darkness between stars, they would sell our honor to save their own skins. They would sacrifice an innocent man to avoid a fight they are too weak to face. Her silver skin glowed with righteous anger. I am Valera, daughter of Emperor Marcus, heir to the throne of the Celestine Empire, and I reject the authority of the High Council. They no longer speak for our people. They no longer lead our empire. From this moment forward, I am your ruler. The broadcast was watched by billions. Some cheered, some wept, some remained silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Then Daniel stepped forward and the galaxy fell silent. I'm Daniel Cole, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of mountains. I am a human. My people were scattered across this galaxy and treated as nothing. We were sold as laborers, used as servants, looked down upon by species who believed themselves superior. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, but we never forgot what we are on Earth, our home world. We have a history written in blood and fire and endless struggle. We climbed out of caves with nothing but rocks and sticks. We hunted beasts 10 times our size, and we survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We split the atom. We walked on our own moon. We spread across the stars despite every obstacle placed in our path. His eyes burned with a cold fire. The jar call us weak. The council calls us worthless, but they do not understand. We are not weak. We have simply been patient. We have been waiting, watching, learning, and now the time for patience is over. He drew his sword. The blade caught the light and seemed to glow with inner power. If the Jareth want war with humanity, they will get one. Tell your High Marshal to send his fleets. Tell him to bring his armies. Tell him to gather every soldier in his dominion. It will not be enough. Daniel and LT Hunk and GT's voice rose, filling the throne room and echoing across a billion screens. Because when our ships darken their skies, when our soldiers march through their cities, when their children ask why the world is burning, tell them it began here. Tell them they brought it upon themselves. Tell them they woke a sleeping giant. He sheathed his sword in one smooth motion, or they can leave. They can withdraw their forces and never threaten this world again. The choice is theirs, but they should choose wisely, because humanity does not forgive. Humanity does not forget, and humanity never ever gives up. The broadcast ended. For a long moment the galaxy was silent. Then from the darkest corners of space, from hidden stations and forgotten colonies and ships that sailed under no flag, a response came. Messages flooded every communication channel. Humans across the galaxy had heard Daniel's words. Humans who had been scattered and broken and beaten down for generations. Humans who had forgotten their heritage and their pride. They had not forgotten anymore. Earth remembers. The messages said just 2 words, repeated over and over. Earth remembers. Earth remembers. Earth remembers. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, old engines began to wake. Old weapons began to charge. Old warriors began to sharpen their blades. The Dracorath had wanted to make an example of humanity. Instead, they had given humanity reason to unite, a reason to fight, a reason to remind the galaxy what they truly were. The war was coming and humanity was ready. The Drawrath fleet arrived 3 days after Daniel's message to the galaxy. 200 warships emerged from hyperspace above Ara's world, their massive hulls blocking out the light of distant stars. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers, hundreds of weapons, enough firepower to turn the entire planet into dust. The Drar High Marshal stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled. This would be easy. This would be quick. He would capture the human, torture him for weeks, and then broadcast his execution to every corner of the galaxy. He would show the universe what happened to those who defied the Dominion. Begin the attack, he ordered, his weapons. Officer hesitated. High Marshal, our sensors are detecting something. What is it? Ships, sir. Coming out of hyperspace, 30 of them. The High Marshal laughed. 30 ships against 200. The fools are coming to die. But as the new ships emerged from the light of hyperspace, his laughter died in his throat. They were human ships. They were small compared to the massive Drawrath warships. Old designs, some of them over a century out of date, freighters that had been converted to carry weapons, mining vessels with plasma cannons welded to their hulls, ships that looked like they had been held together with hope and determination and nothing else, but they flew in perfect formation. And they did not stop, they did not slow down, they flew straight toward the Dracorath fleet without an ounce of fear. A message came through on all channels. A human voice, calm and steady. Attention Dracorath fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Cole of the Terran Response Force. You have threatened one of our own. You have threatened the woman he loves. You have made a terrible mistake. The High Marshal snarled. They send 30 ships and think they can stop us. Destroy them all. Battle began. What happened next would be studied by military scholars for centuries. The Drawrath had numbers and firepower, and the finest weapons the Dominion could build. They had every advantage. They should have won easily. They lost. The human ships moved like nothing the Dracorath had ever seen. They danced between plasma bolts and missile strikes. They found gaps in formations that should not have existed. They targeted weak points that should have been invisible, and when they fired their own weapons, they never missed. Ship after ship exploded in brilliant balls of fire. The Drawrath commanders screamed orders that were never followed. Soldiers panicked and fled their posts. The perfect formation fell apart into chaos, and through it all, the human ships kept coming, relentless, unstoppable, terrifying. On the ground, Valera watched the battle from the palace roof. Daniel stood beside her, his hand on his sword, his eyes fixed on the sky. They could see the flashes of light as ships exploded. They could feel the vibrations as weapons struck the planetary shield. Your people came, Valera whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. I sent a message. Before my broadcast, I did not know if anyone would answer. I did not know if anyone still remembered what it meant to be human. They remembered. Yes, there was wonder in his voice, pride and something that might have been hope. They remembered. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Drawrath fleet was debris. 163 ships destroyed, 32 captured, only 5 managed to escape into hyperspace. The High Marshal's flagship was among the destroyed, blown apart by a coordinated strike from 7 human vessels. The human fleet had lost 4 ships, 1,200 humans had died. But they had won, against impossible odds, against a superior force, against an enemy that had underestimated them completely. Humanity had won. The galaxy watched in shocked silence. Everything they thought they knew about humans had been wrong. In the days that followed, everything changed. The Celestine High Council surrendered their authority to Princess Vila. They had no choice. The people demanded it. More importantly, they knew that if they resisted, the humans would come for them next. Other empires sent diplomats to negotiate peace treaties. The Dracorath Dominion, humiliated and broken, agreed to pay reparations and signed a non-aggression pact. Species that had looked down on humans for centuries now spoke of them with respect and fear, perhaps especially fear. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, not as laborers or servants or animals, as warriors, as survivors, as a species that would never be underestimated again. 1 week after the battle, Valara found Daniel in his garden. The fighting was over. The enemies were gone. The galaxy was entering a new era of peace. But Daniel was exactly where he had always been, kneeling in the dirt, caring for the small green plants that had somehow survived all the chaos. The ceremonies are finished, Valara said. The last of the ambassadors has left. The people are celebrating in the streets. Daniel nodded but did not look up. That is good. You should join them. You are a hero. They would love to see you. I am not a hero. He gently patted the soil around a small flower. I am just a man who did what needed to be done. Valara knelt beside him. The dirt stained her silver skin, but she did not care. She watched his hands work, strong and gentle at the same time, the same hands that had killed dozens of enemies without mercy, the same hands that now cradled a tiny seedling like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Council has fled, she said softly. My people are calling for me to take the throne. They want me to lead the empire into this new age. You will be a good ruler. They also want an alliance with Earth, with humanity, a true partnership between our peoples. Daniel finally looked at her. And what do you want, Val? Ara reached out and took his dirty hands and her clean ones. She looked into his brown eyes, the eyes of a simple cargo loader, the eyes of a legendary warrior, the eyes of the man she had grown to love without even realizing it. I want to stay here, she said, with you, with the man who tends gardens and reads poetry, with the man who became a monster to protect me and chose to be gentle anyway. I'm not always gentle, Daniel said quietly. You have seen what I can do. Yes, I have seen you kill 43 soldiers in 7 minutes. I have also seen you cry when a flower you planted did not survive. She squeezed his hands. You are not one thing, Daniel. You told me that once. Humans can be cruel and kind, violent and loving. You are all of these things, and I love all of these things about you. Daniel stared at her. For a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It was the warm smile she had seen in the early days of their marriage, the smile of the gentle man who thanked servants and asked about their families. Then stay, he said. I will plant more flowers. Valara laughed. It was the first real laugh she had experienced in month, she leaned forward and kissed him there in the garden, surrounded by dirt and growing things, and the promise of new life. Above them the stars glittered with the light of 1,000 suns. Somewhere out there, other species were learning to see humanity in a new way. Other wars were ending before they began. Other futures were being written. But in the garden, on the balcony of a palace on a world far from Earth, none of that mattered. What mattered was a princess and a warrior, a sword and a flower, a love that had grown in the most unlikely soil imaginable. They would face more challenges. They would fight more battles. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, and peace was never permanent, but they would face it all together. And somewhere in the wreckage of a Drawrath command ship, drifting cold and dead through space, a dying admiral had recorded a final message before his ship exploded, a message that would be found years later and shared across the galaxy as a warning to all who might think of threatening humanity. Again, the message was simple, just 6 words spoken in a voice filled with pain and fear and terrible understanding. Never wake the humans. It said, never, never, never the end.